Welcome to the Clinical File. I'm John Cordray. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Josue Ruiz case. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. My analysis is based on my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. What happens psychologically when a parental figure views their own child not as a person to protect, but as a strategic shield against the consequences of their own violence? Can a person truly compartmentalize the instinct to nurture so deeply that they are willing to watch their child spend a lifetime in prison for a murder they themselves committed? The case of Josue Ruiz is a horrifying study in extreme parental manipulation, displaced aggression, and the chilling lack of empathy found in a specific type of antisocial personality. It asks us to consider the depth of psychological depravity required to orchestrate a fatal confrontation and then systematically frame your own flesh and blood for the fallout. You need to stay until the end because the evidence reveals a level of cold, calculated deception that goes beyond the simple self-preservation, touching on disturbing pattern of behavioral red flags that were hidden in plain sight. The true horror isn't just the shot fired in the alleyway, but the psychological warfare waged in the months that followed as a mother manipulated the legal system and her son's future. On March 4, 2022, in an alleyway behind the 66 Diner in downtown Albuquerque, New Mexico, 16-year-old Josue Ruiz was found dead from a gunshot wound. The initial narrative presented to investigators was one of a teenage dispute gone wrong, a physical confrontation between young men that ended in a permanent tragedy. Josue had been dating a young woman, Elizabeth, who was pregnant with his child. It's a life-changing event that served as a catalyst for extreme tension within their family. The focus immediately shifted to Elizabeth's brother, Angelo, who was also 16 and at the time had agreed to meet Josue at the alley to settle their differences. Psychologically, we have to look at the first major red flag, the normalization of physical violence as a primary conflict resolution tool within a family unit. When a family encourages a teenager to settle a dispute through a physical fight, it suggests a profound lack of emotional regulation skills and a failure in parental modeling. This environment creates a vacuum where impulse control is low and the threshold for physical aggression is dangerously high. As the investigation progressed, Angela was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, a charge that carried the weight of a potential lifetime behind bars. He initially took the blame, a behavior that often stems from a distorted sense of loyalty or, more likely, a psychological grooming process by a dominant authority figure. Was Angela's silence a sign of a trauma bond, where the victim feels an intense, misplaced sense of duty to protect their abuser or a manipulative parent? In many cases of parental manipulation, the child is conditioned to believe that their own survival or worth is tied to the parent's freedom or approval. The most jarring mental health indicator in this case is the scapegoat dynamic, taken to a lethal legal extreme by Elizabeth Ortiz-Chavez, Angelo's mother. Ortiz-Chavez did not just witness the crime. Evidence and subsequent confessions revealed that she was the one who actually pulled the trigger, standing in the shadows of the alleyway while the boys prepared to fight. This level of premeditated deception suggests a lack of a moral compass, often associated with narcissistic or antisocial traits, where other people are viewed merely as extensions of the self to be used or discarded. Why would a mother believe that her son's life was more expendable than her own freedom, even knowing the juvenile system would still impose a heavy price? The psychology of proxy violence is at play here, where one person orchestrates a conflict but steps in to deliver the final blow, only to retreat and let another person face the scrutiny. Elizabeth Ortiz-Chavez allowed her son to be convicted and spent months maintaining the lie, a period during which she showed no visible signs of maternal remorse or a desire to make it right. This behavior indicates a significant deficit in effective empathy, the ability to feel the emotional state of another person, especially one's own child. If she could stand by and watch her son lose his youth to a prison cell for her actions, what does that say about the internal hierarchy of her emotional priorities? The case took a dramatic turn when witnesses began to come forward, and Angelo himself eventually confessed that his mother had pressured him to take the fall. He told investigators that his mother believed he would receive a lighter sentence because he was a juvenile, a cold and calculated piece of legal strategy masquerading as maternal advice. This is a hallmark of malignant narcissism, where the perpetrator justifies their exploitation of others by framing it as being for the greater good or as a necessary survival tactic. How does a teenager process the realization that the person who gave them life is the same person willing to essentially end it to save themselves? The trauma of this betrayal likely created a state of cognitive dissonance for Angelo, while he had to reconcile the mother figure with the murderer and the traitor figure. In August 2023, the legal landscape shifted, finally pointing the finger at the true shooter. Elizabeth Ortiz-Chavez was subsequently taken into custody, facing the reality that her attempt to shield herself behind her son had finally crumbled. During the investigation, another disturbing psychological red flag surfaced when authorities found child abuse material on a tablet belonging to Ortiz-Chavez. This suggests a broader pattern of deviance and a total disregard for the safety and sanctity of children, further painting a picture of a predator with a deep-seated psychological issues. When we see a clustering of such behaviors, it often points to a pervasive lack of impulse control and a predatory mindset that views the vulnerable as targets for exploitation. What drives a person to collect such imagery while simultaneously involving themselves in the violent death of a teenager and then framing her own son? The motive behind the murder of Josue Ruiz seemed to be the toxic mix of a perceived honor and a need for total control over her daughter's life and the newborn's life. By killing Josue, Ortiz-Chavez was attempting to sever the tie between her daughter and the father of the unborn child, an extreme form of familiar gatekeeping. This level of control is often seen in individuals who cannot tolerate any perceived threat to their authority or the image of their family, even if that image is already fractured. The psychological impact on Jose's girlfriend, Elizabeth, is immeasurable. She lost the father of her child at the hands of her own mother. The betrayal she experienced is a form of complex trauma that can lead to lifelong difficulties with trust, attachment, and emotional stability. In January 2025, Elizabeth Ortiz-Chavez pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, finally admitting to the act that she had spent nearly 3 years trying to hide. She now faces up to 18 years in prison, a sentence that many feel does not fully account for the psychological destruction she wrought on 2 families. The why of this crime lies in a desperate ego-driven need for self-preservation that overrode every biological and social instinct to protect the young. It serves as a grim reminder that the most dangerous predators are not always strangers in the dark, but can sometimes be found within the very walls of a home. The behavioral clues were there: the history of conflict, the normalization of violence, and the predatory use of the legal system's leniency toward minors. When we piece these clues together, we see a woman who did not just snap, but who made a series of conscious, cold-blooded decisions to kill and then cover it up. The aha moment in this case is the realization that the boxing match was never about the fair fight. It was a staged execution with a built-in fall guy. Josue Ruiz was a young man with a future, a father-to-be whose life was cut short by a woman who valued her own convenience above all else. This case is so profoundly sad in so many levels. We have the young man, the victim here. He just found out he was going to be a dad to be. I'm sure that was not intentional. She killed her daughter's child's dad, her boyfriend. This case has so many tragic turns and twists. I cannot imagine what the families of the victims are going through. And the fact that this mother orchestrated the murder of a young man who was the boyfriend of her daughter, who was the father of her future grandchild, and then blames and points and pins it all on her own son. That's twisted on so many different levels. And now she's in prison, and hopefully she is going to stay there. And the lives that she wrecked and the families that still have to grieve from this, can you imagine what Elizabeth, the daughter, is going through? It's just immense of the struggle, I'm sure. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.